of many. This map has actually kind of developed a little bit of a bad reputation for this matchup specifically, just because of that notorious Warp Prism drop play that has been so popular on this map lately. And it's actually kind of a shame because this map is such a brilliant map in like every other way. There is just that one little terrain weakness that a lot of Protoss players have been abusing. So will we actually see that strategy by one of many? We might. Alright, so let me get into the introductions once again. We have the blue Protoss player spawning up here at the top position. He is down 2 games in this series right now to his opponent. Will he actually be able to come back in Game 3? We have StarCraft Ascension's one of many. And spawning down here in the bottom right position, we have the red Zerg player from Team Quantic, up 2 games after brilliant use of Banelings and Zerglings in both of his games so far. We have Quantic's Hawk. Alright, and like I said before, this map has developed a rather notorious reputation for this particular matchup because of one particular terrain feature for this map. And that is the Warp Prism force field drop. And the reason why it is so deadly on this map is because of how narrow this section is. So Warp Prisms can actually come in from areas that cannot be actually attacked by ground units, like here, for example, or here. They're able to fly up this cliff, and once they land here, they're able to actually just walk a very short distance over to the natural ramp and drop a single force field here because this ramp is somewhat narrow. And that single force field will prevent Zerg reinforcements from either defending the natural or the main base, depending on where the Protoss main army is. So that has been a pretty popular strategy for this map lately. Now the thing is, and like I said, maps kind of develop a culture of their own. Because that strategy has become so popular on this map, Zerg players are obviously very well aware of it. So if they think that their opponent is going for something crazy like that, they could do things like drop spore crawlers or keep their pretty much deny the Warp Prism from ever actually being able to drop its payload in the first place. So how Hawk actually will be able to respond to the threat of that Warp Prism drop will probably determine a little bit of the way that this early and mid-game game goes. If one of many thinks that he can get away with a play like that, then he will definitely go for it. I mean, why wouldn't you? If a strategy works so well on a map and your opponent isn't really all that prepared for it, why wouldn't you go for it? We do have a forward fast expand actually going off here. One of many actually is... He is of a particular breed of Protoss that throws down that second pylon as they are actually getting their forward fast expand here. Now, some other Protoss players like myself, I'll drop my second pylon in my main base. I'll do that because, I mean, that allows me a little bit more leeway in where I want to build my cybernetics core, for example. Like on a map like this, having your cybernetics core in your wall off is actually kind of a waste, and it actually leaves you a little vulnerable because the cybernetics core is actually kind of an important structure. So if you have your second pylon in your main base, it allows you to construct that cybernetics core in your main base as opposed to down here at the natural expansion. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of a preference thing. Everyone's got their own way that their own little nitpickings that they do about their main base. For me, I don't like to build my cybernetics core at my natural if I don't have to. Okay, so this is actually the first game that we're actually seeing this dynamic play out. This is the dynamic in Protoss versus Zerg right now. It is a gasless, quick third hatchery gasless quick third. So he doesn't have Zergling speed yet. So he has almost no way to really exert dominance on the map. But this third hatchery really quickly will allow him to get up a really high drone count for things like the 11-minute Stefano Max or things of that nature. This build actually works out very, very well for virtually any kind of mid or late game strategy. Meanwhile, for one of many, what kind of strategy is he going to actually use to counter this? Now, the thing is once the Zerg player goes for this fast third, it puts the ball back in the Protoss player's court. Do they go for a third base themselves and then turtle up for things like motherships or something like that, or do they go for a type of 2-base timing attack? And if they're going for a 2-base timing attack, what kind of timing attack are they actually going to go for? Now, I know I'm explaining this matchup to people that are probably already very well familiar with it, but I mean, for those of you that don't know, or for those of you that are not all that familiar with Protoss versus Zerg, the strategy that has been so popular lately in this matchup has been an Immortal Stalker Sentry Zealot unit composition. It utilizes the force fields of the sentries to mitigate things like roaches and zerglings, and also the heavy anti-armor damage of the Immortal, which makes it a very good unit for killing things like roaches. And now Zergs have come up with a couple of different strategies for dealing with this. A lot of it is really positioning. Can you catch these sentries and immortals in a bad spot where you're able to pick off some of the more expensive gas units and then pull back? Other Zergs will go for things like a really early infestation pit, a lot of additional Zerglings. My brother, who is a Master Zerg player, is a big fan of using Baneling drops against this strategy. There's all sorts of different things that Hawk could be thinking of right now, and actually he is going to be going for a Spire. This is actually one of my favorite things to do against this particular build. Rather than going for a Roach Warren, which most Protoss will just naturally assume that you're doing, and the thing is that Oneofmany really doesn't have like any information about what his opponent is actually up to, other than the fact that he has that third hatchery down. So it's safe to say that Oneofmany is just assuming that his opponent is going for some kind of Roach build, because that's what virtually every Zerg has been doing these days. But Hawk is obviously now, after 3 straight games of just demonstrating this fact, he is not your typical Zerg player. He has neglected to go for any sort of early Roach build at all in this series so far. Now this could be because he's really just like, you know, trying to be a sportsman with his show match, or this is actually just the way that he actually plays. Somebody that knows Hawk better than me, let me know like if this is actually his preferred playstyle, or if he's just doing this to be cute. But either way, Zergling Mutalisk is actually a really, really good unit composition in this matchup if you know what you're doing with it. It's extremely mobile, extremely mobile. One of the most mobile unit composition in the game by far. It allows you to be in multiple places at once, really punish your opponent for being out of position, do things like this, which is just trade low-cost Zerglings to take down probes, for example. And also, Mutalisks are actually pretty damn good combat units against Protoss ground forces. The simple reason why that is because Stalkers are not the best ground to air against Mutalisks. Now, Stalkers are great ground to air for all sorts of other things, killing battle cruisers, for instance, Vikings, all sorts of other different units. But the Mutalisk is a high mobile, low hit point, low armor type unit that is really mostly countered by things that shoot quickly. Things like Phoenixes, things like Marines, that sort of thing. Stalkers are not the best anti-air in the world for taking care of Mutalisks, which is why Mutalisks do so well against them in large numbers. So these Mutalisks are actually entering the base now. This is the first tip-off that Oneofmany has about the fact that his opponent is going for this Mutalisk tech. This is probably going to force him to switch a little bit out of Immortals. Those Immortals are pretty useless against this unit composition. The Immortals and the Sentries are really not that great at dealing with this unit composition. The Sentries have that Guardian Shield, which is really, really helpful for dealing with the high Mutalisk count, but I mean, the Mutalisks are just so good against the small numbers of Sentries, the small number of Stalkers that Oneofmany has out on the field right now. A lot of supply and resources actually tied up in those Immortals, and those Immortals are not very good against either of those units. So, Oneofmany is actually taking quite a bit of economic damage from this harassment from Hawk, and Hawk is actually expanding twice behind this. He is going up to 5 hatcheries now. He's just going to continue expanding all over the map, and that will give him the production that he needs to just swarm his Protoss opponent with a ton of Zerglings and Mutalisks. Even if he trades inefficiently, his superior economy will allow him to stay ahead in this game. So how is Oneofmany going to respond? The Mutalisks have just been driven out of his base. He did lose a lot of probes and all that. He is down to only 25 probes right now. Is he going to be going for some kind of big all-in-ish type attack, or is he just going to continue sitting back and try and build up his economy once again? But all the while that he is doing that, Hawk is just getting further and further ahead of him in the economic game. The supply is up to 154, 273. This Mutalisk count is getting larger and larger. 17 Mutalisks are about to pop out of their eggs. There they come. A lot of additional Mutalisks are actually out on the field right now, so we are up to 25 Mutalisks against only 8 Stalkers and 8 Sentries, excuse me, and 5 Stalkers. So there's just not a lot of anti-air out on the field for Hawk right now. He is dropping some photon cannons into his main, but against this high of a Mutalisk count, those photon cannons are not going to be all that effective. Mutas are coming in right now. They are picking off some of these photon cannons. A probe is killed actually in there. So Stalkers are actually coming up, but these Mutas actually could take down all of those Stalkers if they really wanted to. And Hawk is actually doing something really cool here. He's controlling 2 different sets of Mutilas independently of one another around the map. He even has them on 2 different control groups. So this is a lot of multitasking coming out on here for Hawk, and this is actually going to make it very difficult for me to actually follow all the action. But these Mutilas have actually made it into the 3rd base, are clearing out a lot of the probes. Oneofmany is down to such a low probe count, he can't afford to continue losing probes at this point. Every single probe that Hawk actually gets is extremely important, and these Mutilas are actually starting to pick off sentries on top of this. The probe count has been reduced to even lower, down to 31 probes against the 81 of Hawk. Hawk is continuing to make a lot of additional Mutilas right now. I find it so fitting, personally, that a player named Hawk is actually building a lot of flying units like the Mutalisk and is using them so heavily against his opponent. This is looking really, really bad for Oneofmany. He is still only down at 81 supply, over 100 supply in deficit to his opponent. A lot of additional Mutalisks are actually being built, and against this many Mutalisks, there are 41 Mutalisks out on the field. It is just almost impossible to actually deal with this many Mutalisks without either +3 Blink Stalkers or Phoenix. You need something substantial to deal with a Mutalisk count this high. But, I mean, I don't think Oneofmany really has the time that he needs to tech to a high enough anti-air count to actually deal with all this. I think these Mutalisks will actually probably force a GG out of Oneofmany. There are just too many at this point. Every single Mutalisk has splash damage. And like I said before, Stalkers are not the best unit in the game for actually dealing with Mutalisks. These Mutalisks are actually just continuing to do a ton of economic damage. Hawk is actually continuing to... He's not actually committing to a full-on engagement at this point. He's really just continuing to harass his opponent, continuing to get additional upgrades up, and continuing to make an even larger Mutalisk count. He's up to 200 supply in just Zerglings and Mutalisks, and actually a majority of this is in Mutalisks. His opponent's probe count is down to a paltry 9, and he only has 16 Stalkers out on the field, which is only like half of the number of Mutalisks that Oneofmany actually, or that Quantic Hawk actually has on the field right now. So this engagement is probably going to go in Hawk's favor. Even if he loses all of these Mutalisks, he has such a high economy to actually replace all of them. And there's the GG. Hawk is actually up 3-0 right now in this series, just demonstrating an absolutely brutal level of Zerg versus Protoss. And again, Hawk is just completely neglecting roaches in this series so far. I really want to know if this is something that Hawk is known for. Does he not utilize roaches all that often? Is this like really his style, the way that he likes to play? I'm not really sure. Someone that's in the chat right now, let me know. Is this something that Hawk does a lot? Because I really want to know, because like this is actually so cool for me, because like I love Zergling Mutalisk, I love Zergling Baneling unit compositions in Zerg versus Protoss. I mean, my when I'm using Mutalisk, my control often slips, and I start to fall behind in my macro a lot because, you know, I'm not a professional player. I don't have the Dongreggu type macro mechanics that a lot of really high-end Zerg players do, so I can't really pull off Zergling Mutalisk the way that Hawk was doing it earlier. But it's still, nonetheless, a very solid style. And actually, what's really funny about that is that build that Oneofmany went for earlier in the previous game, in Game 2, he went for a double Stargate opening, which would have hard countered the early Spire that Hawk went for. But it just seems like Hawk just has he is always a step ahead of his opponent so far in this series. Every single build that Oneofmany seems to go for, Hawk just seems to pick the right build to go against it. And I know that it's like, oh, it seems that he does that. I'm using that word seems, but he does that because he's like a really high-end player, and he does know how to punish the builds of his opponent. So we are on to game number 4. This is going to be on Ohana. This is another good map, I think, for Protoss, but Oneofmany's actually running out of maps at this point. He used so far we've seen Cloud Kingdom, Ohana, and Metropolis in the series so far, and all of those maps I think are a little bit better for Protoss than Zerg in the matchup. So as soon as, if Oneofmany can actually start taking a game or two off of Hawk, Hawk is going to actually be in a really good spot where he can start using his own map decisions against Oneofmany right now. So this is going to be game number 4. This will be on ESV Ohana. I actually love this map. This map is actually just beautiful. I mean, look at this map. I want to go on vacation to Ohana. It is such a gorgeous map. Alright, so down 3-0. Up in the top left, we have our blue Protoss player. Will he be able to take down Quantic Hawk and potentially start one of the most epic comebacks that I've ever seen in casual show match history? We have our blue Protoss player from Team StarCraft Ascension. We have Oneofmany. And down here in the bottom right, demonstrating a beautiful use of Zerglings, Banelings, and now Mutalisks, we have our red Zerg player. The unorthodox way that he plays Zerg is actually making me a huge fan of his already so far today. We have Hawk from Team Quantic Gaming. Alright, now the thing is about this map is that this map is very narrow, if you guys haven't noticed. Compared to some other maps, this map is actually really, really small. It's long, but it's narrow. That means that things like Zergling Mutalisk are not as good on this map because there is not as much room for them to maneuver. There's not as many places for the Zergling, for the Mutalisk to actually hide. There's really only a couple of very large open airspaces that ground units can't touch. That's off to the left side and the right side of the map, respectively. Unlike Metropolis, where the entire map just has a ton of wide open airspaces for Terrans to abuse in drop play and Zerg to abuse in Mutalisk play. So I don't actually think that that particular style that Hawk went for in those last 2 games will actually work all that well on this map. I think he might be forced into some of that Zergling Baneling pressure that we were seeing in the first 2 games. He is actually once again going for his spawning pool a little bit earlier than I'm used to seeing it. Normally I see pools at either 14 supply or 15 supply, but Hawk has been producing his lower at fewer supply than that almost in every single game that I've seen so far in this series. Now, Oneofmany is pretty much gone for the same exact build every single time. He is living up to the Naniwa standards of Forge, Fast Expand, or Die. He is getting that Forge down first and then is dropping not a single cannon before the Nexus actually gets going. So this is a pretty economical opening from our Protoss player. But once again, from Hawk, we do have some Zerglings out on the field. It does look like those Zerglings are just a precaution, just in case that Oneofmany actually does go for an early pylon block. That earlier pool is really just there so that he can get rid of that pylon all that sooner without having to waste drone, like a drone just picking away at it. Now, these Zerglings are actually not going to be able to do any damage like the previous ones, where this wall and this photon cannon, I think, will actually be finished by the time those Zerglings actually get there, or will it? This is going to be kind of close, but Hawk is actually not going to press the issue. He's not trying to get those Zerglings inside the main base. So we are going to be looking like it is going to transition pretty standard from here on out, at least for a little while. I mean, these 2 guys are just like completely refusing to play like what you would normally consider to be a typical Zerg versus Protoss game. Not that I mind. I mean, I've been complaining about this matchup a lot lately in some of the live report threads on Team Liquid, that this matchup has gotten kind of stale and that you really only see like maybe only a handful of builds from either player. But Hawk is definitely proving that like there are other ways that you want to play it that are not quite as popular but are nonetheless effective. So I am actually a huge fan of Hawk for that reason. I'm all about unconventional play. I mean, you see that when you get that way when you're a random player, because you get to see you get to try all sorts of interesting things because your opponent doesn't necessarily know how to open against you all the time. It allows you to go for all sorts of creative openings and strategies that your opponent might not necessarily be ready for. One of my good StarCraft buddies, Impulse Joker, was actually like laughing about the fact that he thinks that I'm just such an unconventional player whenever I play any race. He doesn't really ever know how to play against me. And once again from Hawk, I thought that he was going to go for some Zergling Baneling type pressure, but it just looks like he actually has this build almost worked out to a point where it is part of his standard play. He is going once again for this double Spinecrawler rush. I mean, this is such a cool build that I don't ever see anybody else using. Now, he does have this single Overlord here for spotting, and he is forcing an additional gateway as well as an additional photon cannon from Oneofmany. So Oneofmany is actually not able to make as many probes as he would want normally, and this is right now actually looking like it will turn out, at least at the beginning, very similar to the way that the game on Cloud Kingdom did. This queen is actually picked away at all of the shielding on that forge, almost completely by herself. This spine crawler will then be able to add onto it. One of Many recognizes that he is not going to be able to save that forge and actually is constructing a second one prematurely. But all of these buildings that One of Many is being forced to construct right now to keep the Zerglings out of his base, and the spine crawlers also, as a matter of fact, is resources that he is not able to actually put into his economy or into his tech. So that forge actually does go down. Both those gateways are under fire. There are no units actually out on the field for One of Many to actually deal with those spine crawlers. He is building a single immortal. At least he's trying to. He is slightly supply blocked at the moment. And every single second that he has to wait on that immortal is additional damage being done to his gateways. And again, the beautiful thing about this build is the fact that there is now creep spreading to the third base location of One of Many, and he will not be able to expand until he actually cleans that creep up. And it does look like he will actually lose both of these gateways. Hawk does lose a queen. He didn't necessarily need to lose that queen, but he does. But additional gateway does actually go down, and it does look like both gateways have actually been destroyed. So One of Many actually has no gateways out on the field right now. Warp Gate is just starting right now, as a matter of fact. I don't know if One of Many just neglected his gateway his warp gate timing as a mistake, or if he's just being flustered by all the constant aggression that Quantic Hawk is actually throwing at him right now. But that is a really late warp gate timing for One of Many. He will not actually be able to throw any sort of real damage at his opponent until that warp gate is finished. I mean, you can't. It takes quite a while to produce gateway units out of normal gateways. So during all this time that One of Many is not going to be able to attack because he doesn't have warp gate, Hawk is just going to be able to drone freely. He has a complete license to drone right now, but he is throwing down a Baneling Nest also, so it does look like he is going to go for the exact same strategy that we saw in Cloud Kingdom. Without sentries, because, well, One of Many doesn't have gateways to even build sentries right now. Without sentries, there is really nothing that could defend the front door of One of Many's base from a Baneling bust. Now, we do have 3 sentries in production, and this ramp is somewhat narrow, so there will actually be able to be force fields down in time to actually clear out Banelings if One of Many actually, or if Hawk actually does go for a Baneling bust. So I don't actually know if this will work quite as well as it did on our previous game that we saw this build, but nonetheless, this is actually a pretty solid strategy, and this is something that One of Many is going to have to contend with. Oh, this is actually going to be a big deal if those Zerglings actually catch those Immortals and those Stalkers out on the field, and it does look like they will. Oh, so Sources actually do go down on all of those Zerglings, but both of those Immortals are actually going to be taken care of, I think. No, by the looks of things. Oh, yeah, they will. All of the units for One of Many have actually been destroyed. Those gateways have actually just finished morphing into warp gates. Sentries have actually been warped in. 5 sentries, as a matter of fact. And this is all. Again, all of this is gas that One of Many cannot actually use for his tech, although by the looks of things, because his production's been so hampered by all this fighting, it doesn't really look like he has the production to even spend all of his money even if he wanted to. Hawk is actually going to be picking away at these rocks and is trying to go for a backdoor Baneling bust on his opponent. This is forcing a lot of sentries from One of Many. This is forcing him to construct a lot of additional buildings, and behind this, again, Hawk's economy has just been completely unhampered this entire time. These Banelings are going to make it up the ramp, but they have been force fielded down slightly. So a few Banelings actually are picked off by those sentries, and Hawk does actually look like he has had enough. He is going to be going home, but he has forced so many defensive structures out of One of Many. All of these photon cannons that One of Many normally wouldn't have needed to produce, he has had to produce. A lot of sentries are actually out on the field right now, and again, because he was going for what is a typical like anti-Zerg composition, this unit composition is actually not the best unit composition in the world for dealing with the mass circling Baneling style of Hawk. And I actually love this transition that Hawk is actually going for. He did throw down that Roach Warren, but he's also going for Infestors. So we will be seeing a Infestor Zergling style. Now the thing is that without Colossus, this unit composition is going to be very difficult to deal with, but One of Many doesn't have the money for Colossus right now. Well, he does, but he doesn't really have like the long-term economy to support them. One of Many is actually getting up his hallucination right now, which is mostly which I think is going to be more. You know, normally I would say that that's going to be more for scouting, but I think One of Many is actually just going to go for a big sort of attack right now. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of options open to him. His opponent is up by 29 supply. Hawk is up to 71 drones to the 51 probes of Oneofmany. And it does look like, even though Oneofmany is starting to stabilize right now, his early economy has just taken such a large hit that Quantic Hawk is just able to tech almost any way that he wants to. The big advantage for Hawk right now is that he is up on upgrades right now. His Protoss opponent is only at 1-0. Meanwhile, those Zerglings are at 1-0 right now, but they are getting their 2-1 upgrades before even the second attack upgrade for the Protoss army is actually even started. So Hawk actually does have still has a pretty significant lead right now in this game, but Oneofmany is not out of this right now. He is only 30 supply beneath his opponent. Infestors are coming out on the field, but fortunately for Oneofmany, he did go for a Templar Archives. He did it mostly for the Archons, but he will have High Templars out on the field to actually deal with those Infestors. It does look like a Warp Prism is actually out on the field right now. It does look like he was going for that Roach Warren. He does get it, but I don't really think that Hawk cares. He's really going for mostly a Zergling Infestor unit composition. This is something I really have seen. I saw earlier in the GSL, Slayer's Coca was a huge advocate of this playstyle. He used it a lot. I think I even remember seeing him take down Huck on a televised MLG broadcast. I think that was at Rally. Yeah, I think that was that rally that Coca just took down Huck in a pretty one-sided display using this unit composition. And behind this, Hawk is actually getting up that Hive tech. He is getting Aspire also, so he is going to transition out of this into Infestor Broodlord Zergling, which is pretty much the ultimate unit composition that Zerg can really feel against Protoss. Protoss typically really only respond to that by having that mothership and using the Archon toilet maneuver. But I don't even know if we will actually get to see that super late game. We have Quantic Hawk right now at 192 supply, tons of Zerglings and Banelings, and a lot of Infestors are actually out on the field. That hallucination is actually making a Colossus right now, but I don't know if Quantic Hawk really cares. He's dropping a lot of fungal growths down on top of all of those units, but the Archons are just doing tons of damage to all of those Zerglings, and those Zerglings have been completely obliterated by the splash damage of those Archons, and it does look like Quantic Hawk will be forced back, but his opponent has taken a pretty heavy hit to his supply. More Zealots are actually being warped in right now, but the upgrades are still pretty favored to Quantic Hawk right now, who is researching Adrenal Glands, is getting Neural Parasite, is dropping an Ultralisk Cavern, which I think is interesting. And it's just continuing to make a ton of units. Quantic Hawk right now just has so much production. His economy is just really, really good right now. He could be transferring some drones over to his third or fourth base, but that's not really all that important. He is taking a fifth base on top of all of this right now, and Oneofmany, he is making additional Archons. He doesn't have charge on those Zealots. Those Zealots are only about half effective against these Zerglings, but it's really just Zergling Infestor versus Zealot Archon Stalker at this point. Those two Immortals are just left over from early in this game, but they are not actually all that useful against the unit composition that Quantic Hawk actually has out on the field. Catching this Archon is actually a pretty big deal. Trading an Archon for a couple of Zerglings actually will go in Quantic Hawk's favor every single time. These Zergling run-bys are actually continuing to just abuse the immobility and the high mobility of the Zerg army right now. These Zerglings are just being able to kill quite a few drones, and it does look like he is going to burrow a few of them in the mineral line of his opponent just to kind of continue hampering the mining capacity of our Protoss player, and he is going to also deny the fourth base attempt by our Protoss player, who isn't really looking like he wants to transition into anything other than just Archon High Templar attack right now. We have the first Corruptors actually coming out on the field. That Greater Spire has been completed, so Broodlords actually will be in this battle very, very quickly. We don't really have any sort of attack upgrades for them, but the nice thing about Broodlords, and the reason why Zerg likes them so much, is because their Broodlings actually benefit from the upgrades of the Zerglings. So they have additional attack and armor, the Broodlings do, and Broodlings are essentially free units in a similar way that the Swarm Host is. So I do actually think that Quantic Hawk will lose this fourth base. I don't think he actually has enough units to deal with the super high Archon count of his opponent right now, but he is morphing in Broodlords, and those Broodlords are actually going to be very, very effective at dealing with this This army is very, very strong against Zerglings right now, but it is lacking somewhat in anti-air, and without a mothership to really catch the Broodlords in a bad position, those Archons are actually not that good against the Broodlords. So the Fungal Growth is landing on those Zealots. The Stalkers and Archons are trying to focus fire down those Broodlords, and Neural Parasite is actually being used on those Archons. Every single one of those Archons is absolutely vital to Oneofmany right now. He can't afford to have them used against his own army, but that is actually what is happening right now. Those Infestors are actually just completely taking control of all the Archons in Oneofmany's army, and now Oneofmany is down to 49 supply to the 116 of Hawk. He was actually also able to deny the third base behind that. Oneofmany realizes how far behind he is and calls GG, so that will do it for this show match. That in dominating fashion, Hawk proved why he has a fan following. He proves why he is on Team Quantic. And that was just a brilliant display of Protoss versus Zerg. And the thing is that not a single roach was made that day. And I love that. I love seeing Zerg versus Protoss where not a single roach is ever built. He had the roach horn down just in case he needed it, but he was so committed into not making roaches throughout that entire series, and he still managed to just take down his opponent. And like I said, guys, Oneofmany is no slouch. If you are watching this stream right now and you're like, oh, this Protoss is not that good, no. This Protoss is a really good player. I've seen him play many, many times before. You can challenge him all you want. You will probably lose. At this point, this whole series is just a display of how good Hawk is and how good his Zerg versus Protoss actually is. And the thing is, I know that you guys are thinking this too, and I'm definitely thinking this. I am going to be copying the build that he was using throughout that series. I'm going to be copying that hatchery cancel into Spinecrawler Rush against Forge Fast Expand. I think it is such a cool trick. It requires a bit of multitasking. You still have to make sure that you're keeping your micro or your macro solid behind it. But that is such a cool way to just like get relatively cheap pressure on a Forge Fast Expand and also get that creep spread to the third base. So all sorts of cool tricks that we learned from Quantic Hawk today. I am so glad that I got to see him play the way that he did today. All right, so that will probably do it for right now. Once again, guys, in case you are wondering, if you are just joining me because of all the promotion that we got for this show match, I am KT Vindicare. I am always looking for feedback on my casting. I know that my observing needs work. It's one of those things that I've been trying really hard to work on. So if you guys have feedback on how I've been doing, please send it to me. If you've got some criticisms of me, please send that to me too. Just try and make it constructive and tell me how I can get better. Other than that, I do solo stream casting for replays, and I also am one of the main casters for the Indie StarCraft Team League, so check all of that out. All of my information should be on my screen that I have set up that I made myself earlier today. But we do have some shout outs coming out of here from Quantic Hawk. He wants to thank Quantic Gaming, Startail, Machinima, VS, Twitch TV, Division Razor, Startail, ASUS, ROG, TESPA, UTA StarCraft, and StarCraft 2 India. So those are the shout-outs from Quantic Hawk. And the thing is, Quantic Hawk, if you are listening to this now, you just demonstrated such a brilliant display of Zerg versus Protoss. You have gained at least one more fan by all of this shout-in that I've been doing for the last hour and a half. So I think that will probably do it for today. Thank you once again to StarCraft April for putting this together. That was a lot of fun for me to cast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Shoot me feedback. Follow me on Twitter. Let me know how I can get better, or if you have any sort of like replay that you would like me to cast, let me know. Hawk loves all of you, he says, which is this is just good. Lots of hearts for everybody. All right, so thank you guys for watching. That will probably do it for today. So until next time, I am KT Vindic.